Here we are. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very pleased. This is the Armenian International Women's Association. My name is Rachel Onanyan Nadjarian. I am the executive director. And today, as we mark the second anniversary of a newly elected government in Armenia, we are bringing to you a discussion with the three very dynamic and active women who will help shed light on some of the activity on the local level and both between the diaspora and Armenia over the past 2 years that not only led to the changes we see in Armenia, but also exemplify the possibilities for our own engagement and the change that we can bring about, not only in a grand sense, but in very real, on-the-ground activities that we do individually as we consider our engagement in the future of Armenia and bringing positive change to our homeland. So I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today, as well as our moderator. We have Arsinee Khanjan, who is a multiple award-winning actor. She has a master's degree in political science from the University of Toronto, and it is not a surprise that Arsinee is a civil rights activist and passionate about human rights in general. Khanjan spearheaded the Justice Within Armenia movement, a coalition of Armenians worldwide who were present as monitors during the elections in Armenia in 2017, and she was an active participant in the Velvet Revolution in 2018. Also, we have with us Seda Grigoryan, a journalist and filmmaker based in Yerevan. Since 2018, she has been the head of the Creative Europe desk in Armenia and worked for media channels such as CivilNet and Banadzev TV. In 2017, Seda directed and produced the documentary Way Back Home, which received the Best Short Documentary Award at the Pomegranate Film Festival in Toronto, Canada. And she's been included in the official selection of Golden Apricot IFF and ARPA IFF. And the film recently premiered to the public in 2020. And since 2018, Seda has been the head of the Creative Europe desk in Armenia and a member of the independent filmmakers community of Armenia. Thank you, Arsinee and Seda, for being here and offering your time to speak with us today. The moderator for today's discussion is no less impressive and accomplished as a writer and photojournalist. Roubina Margossian has worked at a number of media organizations, including Armenia TV. She was a correspondent for Kuwait TV from Lebanon and previously served as the English language editor at CivilNet. She is currently the managing editor at Yerevan EVN Report. So we welcome you. We are very pleased to bring this very important discussion and in our hopes help to shed not only a greater light on what all of you have accomplished and what you have done, but hopefully inspire others to continue to do the same for our diaspora and for Armenia. So thank you again. No further ado, I pass it to Roubina.
Thank you, Rachel, very much. This is very exciting for us to have a chance to discuss something that we should have discussed maybe a long time ago. Maybe we should have come together and talked about this experience that goes back 3 years ago, 3 years, and for many of us goes back furthermore. And we've never had a chance until this moment, for which I'm very thankful, because what happened 3 years ago, what happened 2 years ago, is still something that we're trying to understand and trying to put into perspective. And well, lockdown or no, pandemic or no, this is a chance to move ahead, and which is also what we are going to be talking about, knowing what we know, having been through what we have been through, understanding Armenia in certain ways during different times. What do we make of it and how do we move forward? Well, agency at the local level, marking 2 years of a newly elected government in Armenia. This is what we're dealing with. This is what we're talking about, understanding that what agency should we carry, what agency should we have in a newly elected in a reformed Armenia. Arsinee, I wanted to ask you if you've been back. When was the last time you were here?
Actually, almost 2 years ago, in few months, I guess. So I was there in 2018 September, the last time I was in Armenia. Yes, but that was for personal reasons. I had a big birthday coming up, and as I had dreamt about, it did happen that way. So I had the birthday. It was a surprise birthday party in a way, because I didn't expect all the people who were present. But I really wanted it to happen in Armenia, in light also of my connection in the last 3 years, at least 3 years, in a very dense and compact way. So, yeah, I haven't been since then. I was hoping to come to the Golden Apricot Film Festival this July, but as we know, it's traveling is not an option at this point. So,
you were presented by a citizen, Armenian citizenship for your birthday by the Prime Minister himself. Well, I remember. When we talk, Diaspora has understood Armenia, seen Armenia under different lights, seen Armenia from different perspective, with different bias for each group, or with different kind of admiration. And for post-revolution Armenia, I have difficulty understanding what the diaspora looking in is feeling or understanding. And Arsinee, with the film, with your experience in 2016, with your experience in 2018, you have become kind of that bridge, a person who has been had her personal experiences on the ground in Armenia, hands-on, and also very represented, very understanding and representative of the diaspora. So,
yes, to a certain extent, because I mean, that representation was not something that was delegated to me officially, which gave me a very particular perspective. Nevertheless, in hindsight, I am even appreciating more the fact that it was an individual, it was an individual engagement, involvement, but always putting the onus on my identity, of a diasporan identity. And I did at many times, which were perhaps expressions at odds with the major, the larger diaspora, but I did give myself that responsibility to observe on behalf of the diaspora, to observe on my own, in my own perspectives, but also to do it something that in a way historically it was not done with the same sort of approach to Armenia. So it was I'm talking, of course, now in hindsight, and this question always comes back to me as to how much of what I saw and I witnessed and I then shared between Armenia and diaspora was from my perspective, and it ended up coinciding with the momentum, with the desire, with the necessity in Armenia and for the diaspora, and how much of it was something that you know, came in a way haphazardly. I still have not sort of measured in perspective what were the predetermined you know, thoughts, and what happened in terms of improvising in those moments of presence of mine in Armenia, and speaking on behalf of a diaspora that I very much identify with, and I feel that has a great responsibility. Of course, we know this, but also role in being present in the life of Armenia, the nation, in that sense. As you know, Roubina and Seda as well, but I mean, 2016 was a turning point for me to really solidify that relationship with Armenia, in a sense that I became a real civically engaged and interested and involved person, whereas until 2016, probably my largest contribution was in terms of the work that we all have been doing about the Armenian genocide, the recognition of the Armenian genocide. Also, my own journeys over and over to Armenia to find out what was my experience as an individual and as a diasporan Armenian in terms of trying to connect with this ideal utopic sort of country that had its own people, indigenous Armenians, if I may say in that sense, and my place in terms of where I would stand. So until 2016, and from 1991, I would say, which was our first trip to Armenia, and in 1992 we shot Calendar, which was the first diasporan film ever shot in Armenia. It was a long process and journey of discovering events, moments, stories of people, and situations, political situations, social situations, involvement with culture, but all of it was a kind of pieces of a puzzle that in 2016 became a sort of a moment where I had to start building that frame for the puzzle. And from 2016 until the revolution, I think it was very sort of precise engagement on my part, at least with Armenia.
Well, you said at the very beginning that no one delegated you to do this, and a lot of people didn't forgive you for taking on that role also. It was difficult to understand, or it was difficult to identify with what you were doing. So, but since we're talking about agency at the local level, no one is going to delegate anyone, any individual, to say, please go see what's happening, come tell us, because that is simply how things don't work. And Seda, you also self-delegated. Well, that's what filmmakers, documentaries do, documentaries journalists and do, to tell a story. And I'm interested in knowing, why did you believe that it was interesting to tell the story of a storyteller in a way?
Thank you, Roubina. First of all, I'd like to thank Rachel and AIWA for this opportunity to really reflect on this very important time, and also for the opportunity to talk about the film Way Back Home documentary that depicted the story of this historic moment, really, when our beloved celebrities from Diaspora just decided to come and stand next to us in Armenia and join our struggle for equality, justice, and human rights, and that was a turning point definitely for the civil society in Armenia, first of all. Coming back to your question, I think there is a background story behind how I ended up in the middle of this important initiative. And there was, I just had left my job at CivilNet to study in London for my master's in film production. And that was right after everything that happened in 2016 with Arsinée Khanjian during the Sasnat riot protests, which are also depicted in the documentary. And
Arsinée, I promise no one will arrest you after this interview.
Well, in hindsight, I'm very happy that it happened.
Well, any arrest seems to open new doors and huge changes for the entire country and nation in case of Arsinée, so you never know. Well, maybe we will talk and reflect on those events later, and Arsinée can tell you more about it. But what happened is that during that time, we were already in touch. So while I was in London and Arsinée in Canada came up with this grand idea to really bring together the effort of the diaspora and the civil society in Armenia to stand by the struggle for the justice. I just, I don't know how come I was the chosen one to be trusted to assist Arsinée in this very important, very personal journey. And so starting from fall 2016, with a meeting in Paris, when we decided that I will also join this journey, and we started working on her entire project. This was really a thoroughly thought and planned project that Arsinee carried out up until the day of the elections in 2017, when the initiative represented by herself, Arsinee Khanjian, Arsinee Khanjan, and Nadjarian arrived in Armenia for the election observation.
Oh. Justice in Armenia was an initiative that called upon observers from the diaspora to come and observe local elections and
parliamentary elections.
Parliamentary elections.
Well, I mean, it was the parliamentary elections were the obvious, if I may interject in that sense, because we were sort of balancing we were trying to find from the diaspora a reason to be engaged in the civil society predicament in Armenia, but none of us were maybe Eric is a national of Armenia, but none of us were. So we were thinking, what could give us possibly a reason to be present in Armenia without any legal ramifications, without anyone being able to say, you know, this is none of your business, and in any way you cannot comment about this. And because there were the elections, the parliamentary elections that were to happen in 2017 to change the constitution and so on, we realized that part of the manifesto that we came up with the justice within Armenia, there were things like making sure that we change the situation regarding rule of law, police violence, immigration out of the country. I'm forgetting another important point. There were 5 elements, but fraud, election fraud was a major one, and we realized that was the perfect sort of loophole or opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it, for us to, from the diaspora, to say we are coming to Armenia as independent observers on our accounts. There is no organization that is going to really pay us, because observation in Armenia, independent observation in Armenia happened always through the elections, but I think also they were these observers would be paid something maybe tiny, but still there was an exchange of sort of currency. So the idea was to show that we were coming without any political parties behind us. We were coming as individuals who had some interests in Armenia, who had professional expertise in their different disciplines, and that they would be eligible to be internationally sort of nominated observers. Serge Tankian said during one of our interviews that we were not professional observers, but when you think about it, no observer is professional unless they are sort of related to a political party or some kind of organization. So we were absolutely the right people to come to Armenia and find our natural place by getting all the information that we needed to get in advance, in preparation. So this is what Justice Within Armenia Manifesto translated into an action plan in Armenia.
If I may a little bit oversimplify, because sometimes we need to, it was an attempt to come and see for yourselves, even if you were not going to turn around. If you're saying, even if you had said the elections were rigged, it wasn't going to carry much weight, but you were going to come from a place of personal experience when you went back home and say, this is what we experienced. It's not what the international organizations are saying. It's not what the authorities are saying. Here is also our own personal experience. And I don't know how you felt about it, Seda, because I think if you weren't a filmmaker, you would be an observer yourself, an activist, as someone who's very protective of human rights in Armenia. Let's put it this way. And what this said was, again, that message that you are not alone, that we are here when it comes to human rights. We are changing the narrative. We're not just renovating schools. We're not just renovating. We are also here to back you up on other issues, just like human rights, just like civic rights. So in that sense, I believe there was a little bit of change of narrative with that initiative, with what the diaspora could also do for Armenia. But luckily, we're changing another challenge, and that same question can be asked again. But in what format, from what angle do we need to ask this question now? Diaspora still needs to say to Armenia that you are not alone, but we need to find new formats now and new capacity and new agency to continue this dialogue that started 3 years ago.
I think what was the most difficult obstacle from 2016 until 2018 in terms of what I personally witnessed and Seda along with me. And I would like just to make a little detour here in terms of Seda's presence as a filmmaker, but Seda was not only the witness of what I was witnessing, she also was a very important person to connect me with people that I needed to connect with. Until then, my relationship was with Armenian individuals or the young individuals in that sense, was always from the cultural field, about the arts, about filmmaking, theater, and so on. So my understanding of the civil society as a force that was dismissed for a long time until 2016 and 2017 even, I would say for sure. And my realization that not only the diaspora has to start interjecting on an individual basis in terms of what they think they would like Armenia to be or to become outside of the institutional church and so on, all these typical traditional organizations. I also realized that there was a basic problem in Armenia where the civil society existed in very, very tiny little and separated formats. And so it was very important for me to come to know who these collectivities were, these communities were. And Seda was very important because of her generational, obviously, connection, her professional knowledge, herself being an activist in many regards. So it was very important time for me to really get to know and converse and understand and do the groundwork before we even bring all the independent observers at the time. So what became evident to me is that in both the diaspora and Armenia, there was a very basic absence of the voice of the civil society, the individuals themselves. This has changed, of course, 2017, 2018, there was a huge silence. There was an incredible silence. And I remember coming back home after the elections and thinking, okay, what am I gonna be doing next? And I realized that there was nothing that from there on we needed to do except wait and see if the message to say, if there is going to be any change in Armenia, it's gonna come from within. We are not going to be the change makers. We are not going to take on Serge Tankian, Arsinee Khanjian, Eric Nazarian, Vahe Berberian, myself. We are not going to be the face of that change. We are here to say that you can do it and you have to find it. And then there was this silence for a year. And then I realized that there was a
And then you were again called upon in 2018.
In 2018, I was in Berlin. I was doing my own project for April 24 in Berlin. And friends of mine, actually, because I knew that there were all these situations developing and the revolution was starting, but also the diaspora, again, was not being briefed properly. Thankfully, there was the social media and we were getting, the information. And I did not at first hear myself from Nikol Pashinyan, but friends of mine, and Seda included, they just let me know, Nikol Pashinyan is calling upon you and mentioning about Serj Tankian to join him in what's going on in Armenia. And at that point, I thought, oh my God, this silence was all about the thinking process that was going on in the country, and not only on behalf of Nikol Pashinyan. Of course, Nikol probably had started thinking about this in 2016, 2008, 2000, way before that. But I think he was figuring out that the timing and the momentum was right, because there was a consciousness, very quiet consciousness, that had built from 2016 specifically on, and with a particular group of people, the youth, the students, or the young generation, the young professionals, who started realizing that they have something that they literally can do. And as I kept saying, the Messiah was not going to come from somewhere else, from across the borders. The Messiah was in the country. And I'm not making a connection here between Nikol Pashinyan and the Messiah at all. What I'm saying is, if there was going to be a change of self-identification, a change of belief in what we can do in our strength, it was going to come from within and from that particular group of people that I just mentioned. And so when Nikol called upon me, I thought, okay, so this is the time again to say that I can be there. No one else could have been there. At that point, I was the only one who could make myself available. So I did go for that whole week until May 1st, and I thought I still have to witness what I'm going to see in order to say what we can do and how we can do it. And when I got there, my first question was literally, when I met the group with Nikol and all his little company. I mean, it was a small immediate group, but there were a lot of people obviously in the streets supporting him at that point. And my first question was, do you really think that you need the diaspora in this movement? I really was not sure that they needed, and it was a unanimous yes. They were all eating their little sandwiches and they dropped it and they said, ayo, ayo. And I said, why? And they said, because you have to be there and see what we are doing and why we are doing, so that once again, there was that notion that there is a witness of this civil society who was now gathering into much more complex society, which was political by nature at this point, and to say that you've observed everything that has gone on. And it was more or less the same issue as previously, which was, we need people to tell our narrative, but tell it from your perspective, as long as you tell the narrative in a way, because the way the news was going out there, again, it was very choppy, very inconsistent. So I think the one thing that became very clear from 2016 incident is that 2018 needed, again, the gaze of the diaspora and the contribution, if not participation, but contribution of the diaspora to say, yes, this change is yours. We are watching, we are seeing, and we trust you.
And it's interesting that I just realized that the first time you had to insert yourself to be able to witness. The second time you were invited to witness, and within two years. And Seda, you were there. You were there to the second season of these developments. You were also filming, and if the film hadn't already been out before the revolution, I think this would have made such a beautiful continuation of a story that needs to be told. And also that needs to be told because what I find myself to have now above anyone else in journalism that's just starting is memory, is experience. Is personal experience that a better journalist, a smarter person probably would not have access to, or be able to tap in. And you are sitting on these experiences from we've been together at the police station with Sasna Zarer, from witnessing that, from witnessing way before with Electric Yerevan, to all the way to 2018, and well, we'll see what's going to come next, and we're still here. Do you ever think about continuing or building on your documentary with what has happened later?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, and in reality, it seems like this is this ever ongoing process. Of course, there was this big shift in 2018. Before that, I can recall joining my first civic movement in Armenia. There was Xela in 2006. And I appeared there as a reporter the first time they were doing a protest, and as a participant the second time. So it just took me one protest to join them, because I saw these are my type of people and I have something to do here. But even though I joined movement, I joined like Terut movement or this and that throughout the time, the camera was my weapon. So it's here. It's this little one that has seen everything I've seen, from Terut to Latakia in Syria and 2018 revolution and everything. And that's how I saw I can contribute to the movement. Maybe I was not the best to block the streets or to fight the policeman, even though I've done that too. But I felt that there is a part I can feel in that's filming, documenting, and raising the voice. And working with CivilNet, that was also, I think you can also relate to that. We had the feeling that we're doing something big, something important, because we're giving voice to the voiceless, and we are there to really jump out the street and film and be there when the police is beating an activist, and of course I would behave differently, and that has been an ongoing development, that the presence of the media really changed the relationship between the government and the society and the police and everything. And throughout, of course, I have a lot of footage from 2018, and you're right, the film was not finished and published in 2017, and that was already at Nur Pomegranate Festival, November 2017. So maybe I could add the footage I got in 2018, but I have a feeling that there is still that's a new chapter that started. And it's really difficult to sum it up. I mean, it's easier to sum up what was before 2018 and say that this is a story we all lived through and let's look back to it. But what happened in 2018, and it was this biggest splash, and I have a lot of footage that I haven't even looked through. And of course, there's a lot of footage of Arsinee sitting there and waiting for the parliament to make the right decision. They did not make the right decision on May 1st or 2nd when Arsinee was there. There is I even have that first meeting when you met Pashinyan the first time. I have a short piece of that too. But that's kind of a new story. That's kind of a new chapter, which I feel like I still want to observe and maybe document a bit more and see how we can see this story coming to a full end. And of course, talking about the activism and shift in relationship between Armenia and diaspora, and the shift in activism since 2018, I have a feeling that we in Armenia also now need to take on different roles. And if before that I was an activist who would really fight in the streets, because whenever we would raise an issue that would be, you know, speaking to ourselves, and the other side would ignore you, so you end up fighting. Today we have a totally different reality. We are part of the conversation. We say the government listens, there is a conversation happening, and they always take the opinion and the words people say into consideration. And there is a chance we all can be part of the change now. But no one can really sit back and say that, okay, the struggle is over and we are there where we dream to be. We still have a lot to do. So right now I see my participation more on the cultural ground, trying to contribute to changes and trying to put my skills and my knowledge in use in that sense.
Well, my question is though, do we know how to do this now? Because we ask ourselves this at EVN Report all the time. We have not had a chance to sit down, gather our thoughts, understand what's happening, because it has been nonstop since the day we began. And as media organization, of course, the fight is not over. Now we're dealing with a lot of fake news. We're dealing with a lot of misinformation. I as a journalist would like to present the situation in Armenia to the diaspora. However, that perfect language of communication we haven't stumbled upon or found yet. We do English language content, but maybe that's not hitting the nail yet. We need to find another way of communication. So as such, we are again in search of something that we haven't arrived at yet. And it is a quest still, but my question being now, do we know who we are now? We're no longer activists, Seda, as you said. You are doing what you do. You're in culture and
cultural activists now, in a way.
Once an activist, always an activist.
Yeah.
I don't think that really changes. But it's a very good question, Roubina, that you're raising. I think it has different ways of developing. First of all, I would like just on the side to congratulate and be grateful about the existence of EVN. Maybe in terms of, from your perspective, you are not reaching out as many people as you would like, but I would like to say that you are reaching more than it would have been possible even 3 years ago to reach in terms of audience with the kind of work that you were doing. I mean, you are very familiar with CivilNet, and you know how long CivilNet took to sort of enter the local communities gaze and interest, as well as the diasporas, and we can, depending on what sort of elements, factors we're going to assess, that it has been a very successful project, initiative, and it's still going on, or not as successful. So I wouldn't be...
Our fights haven't come to a conclusion yet. We're now still faced with new challenges, trying to understand, for example, how to deal with fake news. So that's again, less matter of maybe reach, but also a matter of ideology for media organizations such as ours, similar to CivilNet, similar to HET. We're each in our own domain now trying to understand what this new challenge is and how we should move forward. Because when Seda, for example, said that now I'm able to have a dialogue with the new government because I can suggest and they can listen. Now sometimes as a media organization, I feel like I'm fighting alongside the new government because we're fighting fake news. We have a new front. However, that doesn't mean we agree on a lot of things, or that's just looking in the same direction. So now there's this other problem that we're facing, and the problems keep developing, and we are trying to find our agency in this new setup. I think the diaspora is going through the same development. Arsinee, how are you feeling?
I'm laughing because I'm thinking that the whole terminology of fake news is quite recent, but in a very clear way in all of our consciousness universally. I mean, in that sense. But Armenia has been particularly, and maybe past ex-Soviet societies have not been protected from fake news in their history. I remember an article that came up a long time ago, and it was a very interesting perspective from an expat in Armenia. I won't mention her name, but you may recognize her, and she will definitely recognize her name. But there was a very interesting article at the time, and this is years ago, where she was talking about the fact that the society is very prone to believe and get engaged in rumors. So at the time we were using the notion of rumors as becoming the factual elements of any situation. Now we're talking about fake news, and what are fake news if not based on the imagination of someone, or desired manipulation of a process, or something based on a rumor. I mean, ultimately that's what fake news is. So Armenia has a history, I think, of that kind of socio-political psychology. So it's not anything that is new. What is new is that we have much more professional news and media broadcasting environment, where they're professional, they are in pursuit of values, elements. So the challenge is becoming evident in a history that already had those problems. So how do you remove yourself from it? I think it's something that you're going to have to, now that everything is more open in a way as well, is that you're going to have to figure out how the whole world, I mean, even major papers like the New York Times are dealing with fake news.
Does the diaspora still need to come and witness Armenia?
It's the diaspora, I think, needs to make sure that they have either institutionally have the way you're doing now, and Seda was explaining, you have direct connection with and a transparent and open connection with the existing government and its institutions, but also the diaspora hopefully has learned a little bit, but also the diaspora newspapers and the diaspora institutions, the thinkers, whoever are running those organizations, have to ask the right questions and not necessarily the safe questions. They have to ask the questions that are perhaps provocative, perhaps difficult. I mean, we don't have an idea. And the most interesting questions are the ones that we ask because we don't know what the answer would be. So not to be afraid of what the answer might be. So I think the diaspora has a place, and I think the diaspora has to believe that this place that it has today is a much more responsible place, and it has to be therefore more responsive, because with the past history of the regimes and the governments, the diaspora had some kind of role, but it was not invested with an accountable role. So the diaspora has to understand that this particular government, the new government that it has been in place since the revolution, wants a real significant engagement and not the passive one to be told what it needs to do. I think the diaspora has to make suggestions. Sometimes they're going to be pertinent, sometimes they're going to be impertinent. They're not not appropriate. But the government is, I believe, more than ever in conversation in a direct way with the diaspora. And that in itself is a very important timing that we should not lose the grip over. If we don't take advantage of that, I think we can easily slip into passive, apathetic relationship all over again, because for a long time we have been in that relationship. It's easier to go back to bad and or old habits than try to groom the new ones. So when Seda is saying that you know, there is this time where we're thinking, and I certainly agree that it's difficult to make full assessments and evaluations, but it is very important to still witness how these last 2 years have evolved. And I certainly sometimes find myself in a situation where I don't comment at all about this or that situation, even though I do have a very specific opinion about it. But I want to let time also to give me a sense how in terms of how the society is working with its own government, and how that society is understanding its own internal problems, and how I can be witnessing, from what perspective I can be witnessing. So I don't have concrete ideas as I did in 2017, 2016, for instance, or even in 2018 when I said, yes, I should be going, and it was a clear decision that I should go. Now I am more in this as a diasporan Armenian who has citizenship, but I'm sort of, I still know the parameters of my understanding. It's not the same as yours who lives there. I mean, you have an incredible, you and a lot of our expat community has a very, very interesting also role to play in Armenia, because now they have the whole history of their life and seeing changes there on everyday basis, but also they carry historically something from elsewhere in the world. So I think these different perspectives are gonna bring always the fact and the truth to a better place than in the rest of the world, because we are in and out as a nation, as a community. So we can have check and balances. That's what I'm trying to say, that maybe other countries don't have this privilege against this plague that is the fake news.
And being people of culture, cultural agents, do you think maybe the way forward now is to try to find new agency, because society without culture is never complete society, and even democracy that doesn't pay attention to culture or ignores it is not complete, and nothing is. As women, as artists, do you think that maybe you might find your agency through culture in Armenia, and start a form of a human rights, political even dialogue through arts and culture?
I think Seda can say a lot of things regarding this. I have my own ideas, but I don't think they're going to be as original as in new as what Seda can say, because now she's dealing with different organizations as well, with film and culture directly. So maybe Seda, you want to observe what's going on in Armenia, and what is the opening or the closing down that is happening?
Absolutely, yeah. That's pretty much exactly where I see the change and where I see we can contribute now, me and people like me. And I can also tell that being the head of the Creative Europe desk, I interact and meet and work with different organizations and artists. And here again, I can see that young women are on the front lines of the change. And when I'm saying we're cultural activists, I mean that this is the time to really to fight the old system, which doesn't necessarily need to be a political system, but the system of the mindset, basically, of the people. and the way we perceive the things, how they should be. So we do have this system inherited from the Soviet times, which hasn't really changed and reformed. And we need these new bright ideas to come in and really to break the system and build something new in cooperation, not in a fight, but in cooperation with one another. And of course, diaspora has a lot to contribute in that. And I think maybe also since 2018, one of the changes was that we do not necessarily need to ask diaspora to, you know, take a ticket, buy a ticket and fly out to Armenia every time we need a contribution, not in the sense of a financial contribution, but for contributing with their skills, with their talent, with their network. I remember these discussions right after the revolution happened. We had this gathering where a lot of young people came together discussing what we can do now. At that point, I didn't have my new job and I didn't know what to do, but I kind of found myself somewhere between diaspora and culture. That's where I want to be. That's where I can see myself contributing. And in the end, I ended up in a place like that. And I remember this discourse that was very loud at that time, not only at that gathering, but on Facebook outside, of being a network state. So we need to connect from wherever we are and be connected and be continually exchange ideas and you know, work together. For some reason, I'm maybe really very lucky in a sense. I keep working with artists and new friends from diaspora, and I enjoy finding these new names. Like last year, I worked with this Argentinian Armenian singer who came to Armenia, and we traveled all throughout Armenia with Arsinee Khanjian, and we filmed 19 music videos introducing Armenia and the contemporary Armenian music scene to the world. And this April 24th, I was on a live conversation with the Armenian activists from Paris, the Sharjum movement. These bright young Armenians who live every day with the idea of doing something good and something new to contribute to the newly formed government and Republic of Armenia these days. But they do not necessarily need to travel to Armenia to make a change. Now we need to talk to each other from wherever we are, especially in this quarantine time. Thank God we have the technologies and we can really communicate and develop new ideas and new projects. But the conversation needs to go on and it shouldn't stop, definitely.
Well, my last question, and this is going to be a question I would never allow myself to ask anyone. I wouldn't, but I am going to, because we are trying to understand what's next. We are trying to understand what we're living through and what we're seeing. So I'm going to ask each of you to maybe try to describe Armenia 2020. I don't know, before or after coronavirus, but Armenia in 2020 in a couple of adjectives.
Well, I would say
sorry.
Armenia 2020 is now, and not long ago it seemed like such a faraway date, 2020. It's very strange. But what I can say definitely is Armenia is present. Armenia is on the map, and not on the map for us because it has always been spiritually, historically, emotionally on the map for us, but it's on the map of the world. I think we have brought, I was thinking about this because there was a very sad event that I was reading about in Egypt, and I was thinking, my God, they went into that revolution and things had become even worse. We know about what happened in Iran, the Arab countries in general, and so on. And I'm thinking, look at us. We had a revolution, and our revolution was not only a peaceful revolution. It will be remembered like that, but it was a revolution that really continued to be revolutionary in small steps in the coming years, which are only 2 years from now. But when we think that in terms of how we represent the entire country, you know, with a government and a presidential system and so on, I think we have a profile that we never really enjoyed the same way. We don't cringe at the idea of you know, being seen or not seen. I think we are there, perhaps small sort of spots still, but we are definitely there. And just to add something in terms of what we were talking about, culture, the one thing that I really urge the present government, and I'm sure they're sensitive to that, and it could be, as always, a financial situation, but I think the moment a state or a government understands really viscerally the importance of its artists, and in the case of Armenia, our artists being all around the world as well as in the country, I think there are huge sort of jumps that we can make, the same way we can in sciences when we make discoveries and names go out. I think artists are really the bearers of that flag and that identity. So there should be a really visceral understanding, hopefully by the new government in place, that the arts have to be invested in, and not every project is going to be productive, but when one of them is, that's going to go a long, long way, more than any other program that would be expected to deliver once in a while. So I would say right now, I just feel that I still have a smile on my face when I think of Armenia, and when I imagine my compatriots in Armenia, I think we are still smiling, and this is a very beautiful face of the nation to feel that we have, and also present it to the world.
Seda?
It's difficult to add something after Arsinee, but yeah, I believe Armenia is starting from 2018 and on, it's going to be more and more open. So open is the word for me for Armenia. Armenia is creative. Armenia is innovative. I think the 3 words really describe the way I see our reality, and I want to see it more and more. And when I say open, it's not only open to the world, but we also open up from the inside, because there are these tiny, tiny locks we've been locking up inside as well, in our internal relationships, in our mindsets, which we need to open up to the world as well. And be creative in the face of all these challenges we and the world is facing today. And I believe it's going to be fine. We're going to be fine.
We are.
Amazing.
I mean, one thing I may want to add, and this is not to change the positive conversation and the spirit of what we discussed, but it just there is one contradiction that I take it on personally as a woman, specifically as a woman, and since this forum is also addressing a lot of our audience is numbered by many women, I hope men as well, but as Seda said earlier, for instance, in the film community and work, there are a lot of young women, and I think in most professions in Armenia, all of them, if not, we have incredible young and perhaps less young women who are carrying out beautiful accomplishments. However, I say this as a positive issue to bring up, because I think as women we have to be very, very closely monitoring this situation. It exists all over the world. It's a universal problem, but just because there are murders in the United States in big numbers, I don't feel that it's normal that it would be also in Armenia, and we let it go. So it's the same thing about domestic violence. Domestic violence and violence against women is still a very significant, really not appropriate sort of part of our social stories and history. We do have a problem of denying the problem itself. And so I would like to say that we have to be engaged socially in terms of making sure that that issue, which is a cultural issue, which is an identity issue, it is a national issue, and it concerns both Armenia and the diaspora, and mainly our women sort of community and contribution as human beings. So I would love to see that in a very serious way, that issue being addressed. And so we are not normal as other places, because domestic violence and aggression, harassment of women is not a normal thing. And I don't care if it exists in France, it exists in Sweden or in Mexico. I don't want it to exist in Armenia. And I would like us to be, and this is an ongoing problem, and it has not less to do with who is the government, more it has to do with education, and more it has to do with all our forces, all our women and men becoming involved with this issue, both in Armenia and in diaspora, and not try to deny it or say that kind of thing doesn't exist. The numbers are there, the stories are there, the witnesses are there, so we cannot ignore it.
Unfortunately, and yes, it's also our role to talk about it, to never let it go, to as difficult as it is, to point it out, and never let go a single case until we have gathered them all. We have the whole picture. It's visible to everyone, not only to us. Well, thank you for this conversation, and I think this also shows why dialogue is important, why we need to talk amongst ourselves with others, why we also culturally need to learn to discuss politely, disagree politely, passionately, but still to be able to bring any conversation to a conclusion. And thank you for this opportunity to the Armenian International Women's Association.
Thank you so much, all of you. Amazing discussion. I don't know, all this passion and brain power in this one room screen is incredible. And I think that although this discussion has ended, I think we are left with numerous ones to follow, as you all put forward in various ways. Whether we look at our agency today, Armenia now, Armenia of the future, culture, identity, nationalism, I think we could probably host several of these discussions to be continued for sure. And I think if I wanted to just make a thread from something that was brought from the beginning of the idea of witness, and then and this film being witness, Arsinee being witness, and certainly Roubina, a daily life of witness. But the question of whether or not the diaspora still needs to witness Armenia is very interesting, because I think more often than not, witness is thought of as the observance of a traumatic event when you bear witness to something, or something that is very emotionally jauntling or something. But it is a way of processing experience and obtaining empathy and support for a situation, which is really the basis for humanity, is that access to empathy. So I think if we think of witness as being a form of engagement that brings us empathy, that brings us that support and that connection, human, it is void of lots of things that can destroy the narrative and destroy our common initiatives and goodness.
Well, maybe that's where our optimism is coming from, because maybe I'm sure Seda will agree with whatever's happened in the last 3 years that we were in the witnesses of. It wasn't just traumatic, and sometimes it was ecstatic. And so we persisted in our capacity as witnesses. However, the whole emotional range changed from fear to happiness to concern to resilience. So I think we have come to use the word understand the word a little differently than we used to a couple of years ago.
Which is very empowering. I mean, we don't have time to, I think instantly of genocide, right? We think of witness and genocide, and we think of survival, but we still have to grasp the empowerment from that, to be discussed another time. I'm sure we can have another discussion, right? But I love it, and it's fantastic. We have a charge ahead of us, and I'm so excited we did this. And for everyone watching and others, we will host the documentary on our social media, the YouTube, Way Back Home, so everyone can see it. It is about 31 minutes long, and I've seen it, and I can't wait for others to see it. So thank you so much for offering your time and your insights. Incredible women. You're an inspiration to me, to everyone. And I look forward to seeing you in person in Armenia soon.
This is pathetic. The entire diaspora should stand on its feet and stop this ridiculous situation in our homeland.
I don't give a fuck about the KGB. I don't give a fuck about the FSB.
It is essential that people feel free to elect the government they want.
Ենթադրեմ գոչը ինքնին առաջին անգամ լալով, որ մասնակցությունը Սփյուռքի դառնա քաղաքացիական մասնակցություն ամենայն հնարավոր դեմոկրատական կետնի վրա, իբր թիդորդ ունեինք այդ դարելիությունը, որ մինչև այսօր այդ մեծ տիպով դեղի չէր ունեցած.
He said the bones of this ancient, proud nation are deep and powerful, but the muscles on these bones need to be exercised, and democracy is a muscle.
Բայց մենք professional monitor չենք դարիներով, մենք արտիստ ենք, եւ մեր կորձը ցեզի ներշնչել է, որ երթակ եւ կվերգենք։
Նախնի ընդրությունները լա, շատեր արդեն դուրս եկած են իրենց նամակատուփը մեկ ցերկը ընդության թերթիկը մեկ ցերկ.
We had a guy who basically was keeping tabs on the voters sitting right behind the ballot box.
Chose